Hey there, Russ here. Welcome back to the shop. Okay, we're going to talk about the easiest box there is to make, and that is, yes, the four-cornered miter box with flat panels for the top and the bottom. I've already shown you that it's so easy to make because all you're really making is 3 pieces. You're making them in pairs, so you make 2 identical of each piece 3 times, and if you do it right, you can put it together, and you can do this whole thing in under 5 minutes, or under 10 minutes, excuse me. At least I can. And I think that when we get done here with this series, you'll be able to too. So if you want to make a box real quick for whatever reason, or a drawer, you're going to be able to make it in a very minimum amount of time, easily, without having to think about it, which is what I really like about making a box like this. What gives it its strength and its capabilities, it's scalable. If I had to make 20 drawers, I would cut out 40 pieces of the 3 different pieces I needed, and I'd have 20 boxes. If I needed them to vary, it would be very easy to vary as you made them, but you still make them the same method so that when you get done, they still fit together perfectly and make that drawer or that box in different sizes real easily. So it's real easy to scale this up and down, and to also duplicate it to make a bunch in batches. So that's what I like about doing this design. And I do it all on my table saw. So today, what I wanted to talk about real quick, because I was going to do all at once, I was going to cut all the pieces right here on my table saw, and we're going to do that on the next video. I hope. I got to thinking about it, and I thought I really need to talk about this before I do that cut up, because this is what we're going to use to cut up. And this in particular, believe it or not, is what this used to look like before I made it into a box. In fact, this was the other part of that. You recognize this. This is the piece of veneered hardboard that I put together the other day, and I made 2 of these. And they actually came out really well. And I cleaned them up and have them squared up so that I know what I'm working with. Because the real challenge when you're making boxes, and that's what we're going to talk about here today, is can you see it? Can you see this and know how to turn that into this? And what size a box can I make from that? Or what size board do I need to be able to make this box? And this is what we're going to talk about here real quick, so that you can understand how to see the pieces of wood and how you can say, well, what kind of box can I make with that? Is that enough wood? It really will help you to pull the wood that you need off of the shelf, and only the wood you need in order to make a box that you want to make. When I made this one, if you remember, that one I made from this. This is almost identical to the piece that I made this box from. And again, the top and the bottom, the only difference between these 2 boxes is I used leather and sprayed it on the flat panels and gave it the leather look on it. But it's basically the same construction. And to make this box was identical to making this box, really. I just did different materials, and I had my stop blocks set at different places to make those 2 different boxes. But everything else is always the same. That's what I like about this box, is that you don't have to think about doing it when you make it. And when you get done, it's going to fit together perfectly every time on your 4-corner matchup. If you have a problem once you do the cutting, I'll show you how to check that here real quick. And if you have a problem, then you take it over and shoot them on my rigid sander. And I showed you how to square them up using that oscillating sander. You can do it with any disc sander, belt sander, or anything like that to square it up if you messed up here. And don't get me wrong, you will mess up here once in a while. Sometimes you get a little piece of wood stuck in there on one of them and you didn't see it, and so that thing didn't cut out exactly square, and those things can happen. That's why you want to be ready to do that. But theoretically, if you're careful, I can make this box very easily, very quickly. And to do it, all I'm going to do is use my table saw. I'm going to use my miter gauge for doing the cross cuts and the bevels, and I'm going to use my fence to do the grooves in the pieces of wood. And the only thing I'm going to use to do all of this, no tape measures, no rulers, no nothing. I'm going to use George, which, as you know, is my version of a kerf maker. This is a double kerf maker, so I call it George because it works twice as hard. And my magic block. And we'll go over this when we do the cutting here. So, but we need to make sure we have what we need in order to make the box. So, how do we make a three-corner box, a three-corner match, grain match box using this piece of wood here? Quite simply, and how big a box can you make with it, I should say. This thing is just over 28 inches. So let's say I'm going to use 28 inches of this to make my box. Well, right offhand in my head, that means it's going to be 7 by 7 box. And I will use up pretty much this whole board. And I can make up to a 7 by 7 inch box that's 5 inches tall, because this is 5 inches wide. I also have for my top and bottom panel, if you remember, I made these the other day. You saw me glue these up. I've cleaned them up, and now you can see they're actually very nice, and they're very good, and they're going to work perfect for the top and bottom panels on any boxes that I want to make here. So, with that in mind, the other thing I want to mention real quick is this box, as I told you the other day, I made it from a piece of wood that was identical, just like this. I made that box. To make this box, I cut it in half, so I had two pieces, and I cut one side and one front, and now the other half I cut one side and the back of the box out. So this made a box too. The only difference is you're not going to get a three-corner match from a board if this is what you start with, as opposed to doing it with this. I can get a three-corner match without any problem. So, we're going to show you both ways. Now, I will tell you a secret that you probably don't know. And that is that with veneer, I can actually do a four-corner match using this board. And that's what we're going to do. Because when I do this one, we're going to put the gray to the inside of the box instead of to the outside, so that I'll have a nice finish inside of this color here, this box here. And the outside will be made from this, and then all we have to do is take two pieces of veneer that are book matched and lay them out in such a way that we can then cut them and put them on our box to get a four-corner match on the grain. And I'll show you how to strategically do that, is to take your board and veneer it. I would veneer it before I actually assembled it. And we'll go over all those steps in another video if you're interested in knowing how to do a four-corner match using veneer. Just leave a comment, let me know. And I think that's about it. So my next video will definitely include cutting this board up and getting a three-corner match from it without measuring a single thing. So if you have any questions about any of this, any comments, just leave them down below. One more quick thing. When I do this, you will notice that I do everything right here on my main table saw. And I can do all of this right here on my main table saw. The reason I do it here is because this thing is set up dead accurate. I have a dead accurate fence. I'm going to use a miter gauge as opposed to doing it with a, let me take this down. I'm going to use this instead of a sled. And the reason I'm using this instead of a sled is because I do use a 7 1/4 inch blade in my table saw. And the only disadvantage to doing that is that means that I don't get the depth of cut that I need. I don't get much of a depth of cut, I should say, when I bevel a cut. In other words, if I go to the 45 to make 45 miters and I lean that blade over, this blade from the tabletop to the top of the blade, which is the maximum amount thickness of wood I can cut at a 45, is only about 3/4 of an inch. This blade is much smaller than a 10 inch, and that's the one disadvantage. But I can make up for that very easily by using a miter sled as opposed to a table saw sled that has that bottom board, and depending on the thickness of that bottom board, that has to be taken away from the height of your blade capability, because if I have a 1/2 inch board on my table saw sled, then if 3/4 inch from the tabletop is the max, when I use a sled, that means that that blade's going to stick above that table saw sled only about 1/4 inch. Not enough to cut this thing at 45-degree bevels. So that's why I use this, because I can cut up to 3/4 inch material at a 45 right here on this saw. If it's bigger than, if I have something thicker than a 45, thicker than 3/4 inch, and I need a miter, quite frankly, I just do it right on my miter sled, or my miter saw instead. And that's no big deal. So there are workarounds for everything you do, but using this blade and this saw, everything cuts so much better, so much easier, and with a lot less chance of there being a mishap. So the other thing I want to mention real quick, and then I'll let you go, is when I do this, and I told you I'm going to be using George. Well, when I'm using my miter gauge, I'm going to be cutting this board up on both to length and at the 45 on here. But when I cut the grooves, I have to cut those using my fence and not my miter gauge, because I'm cutting grooves. I'm cutting with the grain and long ways on the wood, as opposed to cross cutting it if you're using this miter saw. So I'm also going to show you how to use this on the fence somewhere pretty quick. Now, so I have to do a follow-up on the kerf maker is what I'm trying to tell you. And I am going to make a video follow-up about this kerf maker and how to use it using your fence instead of using a cross-cut method like a sled or a miter gauge, because you do things a little different when you're using your fence to do cuts. And I'll show you all that when I do this. The question is, do you want to see how to use this on the fence? Or should I just go right through it? Because when I do it, I'm just going to go through all these steps. And you won't know how I really did this unless I explain it to you. Until once I explain it to you. Whether I do it before I do this fork, before I do all the cutting, or after, I will do this video. You just need to tell me whether you want to see how to use this on the fence first, or whether I should go ahead and do the 4 cuts, do all the cuts on this instead, and make all my pieces to make another box. So when you figure out which way we want to do it, let me know. And like I said, if you know how I'm going to do it using only my magic block and my kerf maker, let me know. You already know how to do it. I'd love to know, who already has figured it out. And if you haven't, stay tuned, because that's exactly what we're going to do. We don't use no rulers around here if we don't have to. And I'm going to prove it to you. So, I do want to thank you for stopping by. Leave your comments and your thoughts down below. I hope I explained to you, can you see it? So, because remember, when you see a board like this, I can look at this board and I know what size box I can make from it in my head. And I know what kind of box this is going to make. Or I can envision the box and say, how much do I need? And I can figure out how much wood I'm going to need and what do I need in order to make a 3-corner match, a 4-corner match, or it doesn't matter if you match the corners like I did here. The 4-corner match doesn't matter on this box. So depends on what you want to accomplish with that box and what you want it to look like when you're done. You have to kind of think about it at a time. So the question is, can you see it? Can you see it? Well, hopefully now you'll be able to see it a little easier than you could before. So thanks for stopping by. If you like this video or you learned something here, hit that like button. Lets me know that I'm doing the right thing. But most importantly, please come back again, because I'm nowhere near done, as you can tell. Thanks, and we'll see you guys again very soon. Bye.